Hello, and welcome to part 2 of the French Revolution. When we left off, the French had just stormed the Bastille, taken it over, killed the governor, grabbed the weapons from the arsenal, and started to take it apart stone by stone by stone. Now, the question is, what is the response from the government, from anything else? There really is no response. They see this as, progress. They're moving, they're taking down the old regime. And now, because there is no please stop with the violence, we have an expansion of it. We eventually move on to the Great Fear. On August 4th, 1789, several noblemen and clergymen renounced their noble rights to the National Assembly to be able to stop the riots at which the countryside, the peasants, were revolting against their landowners, against the aristocracy. They were sick and tired of paying feudal dues and high taxes that they could not afford. And so, with this moment, when people start to renounce their titles, we see that the old regime, the old way, the old class setup of France is officially abolished. Then, in August, later in the month of 1789, we have the first draft of the new Constitution. We have the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It is very similar to the Declaration of Independence in proclaiming liberty, freedom, and natural rights for the French people. However, two of the most powerful ideas were civic equality and popular sovereignty, but women were not included. However, if you read all the wordings of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, you would notice that slavery would no longer be allowed, which puts into a big question what's going to happen now in Haiti. But that's for a later PowerPoint. So, the night session of August 4th, 1789, with that feudal regime in France being formally abolished because the people are giving up their rights, all Frenchmen were now subject to the same laws and to the same taxes. Finally, that thing that, Necker, Briand, and Cologne were saying, we need to figure out the tax system. Finally, it is being addressed here on August 4th, 1789, because when people are giving up their titles, well, then they got to be taxed. But the kind of funny thing is feudal dues were not 100% outlawed at this point. Peasants would need to compensate their landlords with direct payments for obligations for which they had supposedly been freed from. So there's still confusion among the peasantry and still some resentment. Now, the question is, are people getting bread? Are people getting fed, especially in the cities? Well, in October 1789, the bread prices continue to go up. People cannot afford things. And again, there's murmurs about what is going on in Versailles. What is Louis doing? What is Marie Antoinette doing? Are they going to move troops in and stop the movement, to stop the National Assembly? What is going on? And so women, upset about the bread prices, kind of take matters into their own hand and head on out to Versailles. This is the Women's March on Versailles. And now these are not just any old typical ladies that are just, getting up from, their chair where they have a needle and thread. These are the fish ladies. They are from the fish market and they are super, super strong. These are the ladies that know how to fillet a fish really quickly with a knife. And they are also used to throwing around the big giant fish and picking up the giant crates and moving them around. They have muscles and they know how to use a knife. This is not a good thing for Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette to have coming knocking on their door. So they go up and they protest for a while. The nice thing of Versailles is you have this nice area in the front. Yeah, it can be muddy if it rains, but a nice area in the front where you can stand around and you can protest. But things are not coming to an end. Louis is not helping the situation, and he is not giving in to any of their demands at all. And so eventually they break on in. I mean, they come racing in, and they are calling for Marie. They want her. And she is scared to death. They are chasing her through Versailles, and eventually she finds refuge with King Louis XVI. She runs behind him for safety. The ladies come barging in the room after they just kind of filleted her bed. Oh yeah, they stabbed that thing up. They go to Louis's quarters where Marie is, and what do the fish ladies do? They bow before their king. They still respect him. He is still the king. The French people at this point are not at the point that they are going to just go and kill their monarch. No, 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 no. They do politely ask him, though, with knives in hand, hi, would you like to come move to Paris? Because right now you're 26 miles away, and we kind of want you to be able to, you know, be right there for us. So can you come move kind of in Paris? And of course, at this point, they are going to say yes. I mean, I'm going to say yes when a lady with some mighty biceps is going to be there with a knife in my room. I would say, yeah, okay, I guess I can go move to my other nice royal house. I can do that. And so they oblige and they move. Now, with this, we start to have people outside of France writing about what is going on. Sir Edmund Burke basically wrote on his reflections on the revolution in France, it's going to end with a dictatorship. That's where this is heading. Of course, there's other people that said no, like Sir Thomas Paine, going, no, 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 no. This is great. They're continuing on these movements that started in America in 1776. Well, Burke's going to be right. Anyway, so the French government is still trying to figure out its financial issues, and they decide to confiscate church lands in 1790. This is very controversial because guess what? A lot of people in the rural areas love the church. This is their Sunday fun. And so they start to confiscate these lands, and they are then using these lands to create a new currency. So the currency is based off of the seizure and then sale of the church lands, which means that this currency is not going to be good forever. People who purchase them have special privileges with the sale of church lands, and these insignias go and circulate like paper money, except that inflation is going to hit and they're going to eventually lose 90% of their value because it's just based off of the sale of land, and land is not something that's going to be around forever if you're selling it. But it was something that they tried for a period of time. They then instituted the civil constitution of the clergy on July 12th, 1790. The Catholic Church was now subordinate to the French government, so they are under the French government, not that Pope over there in Rome. Church members could not commit themselves to any entity outside of France, so do not go and swear allegiance to the Pope. No, 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 no. It is to France. And the red, white, and blue, the colors of Paris, the red and the blue, and the colors of the House of Bourbon, white in the middle. Priests had to take now an oath stating that they are going to be kind of respecting this new system, the French government being the head and not the Pope. Now, if you're a priest of the Catholic Church, kind of saying an oath where you're kind of putting yourself not under the Pope is very anti your religion. So many are going to be sent to prison for being anti revolutionaries. Now, moving on, we have another constitution, the Constitution, or the formal Constitution, the Constitution of 1791, which limited the monarch's power and handed over the main duties to the National Assembly. Only active tax-paying citizens could vote, which is another incentive for people to hurry up and pay your taxes. During the same period of time, we have Olympe coming out and writing the Declarations of Rights of Women, using that men's declaration as that kind of base to then now call for women to be treated as citizens, for them to get these equal rights, egalite, but it's totally not adopted. Sorry. Anyway, provinces and parliaments were replaced by departments now, or equally sized administrative units. So if you're trying to think about this, think about it like counties in the state. Now we have these departments throughout France. Louis is seeing that he is basically a pawn in Paris and that things are getting worse and worse. So he decides to try to escape. Him and his family are going to make a run for the northern border, which is the closest border. And it's also Austrian-Belgian territory. So it would be going to an Austrian-controlled territory. And with Marie being Austrian, it seems like a pretty good bet. However, at a border post, the king is recognized. Now, he tries to get away with it by simply showing his royal attire and assuming that the people will bow to the king and allow him to continue on. But things have changed now that it's 1791. And these aren't the fish ladies of old. No, they are going to seize him, and they are going to be sending him back to Paris. And at this point, the people of France start to see their king as a traitor, a man who is ditching them, who is running away from them. And so things are getting worse for the king. And now things are going to get even worse because we are going to have the Brunswick Manifesto. The Duke of Brunswick, who is from Prussia, stated that the royal family must not be harmed at all, and if they were, then Paris would be leveled by the Prussian army. War is now on the horizon, and the French Assembly are welcoming it. They're not scared of it, they're welcoming it. A nation that is financially struggling is possibly welcoming war. So they sought to strike first. They're going to strike the first blow against Prussia or against any other country that wants to come at him. And it's not really the best timing financially, but also about one half of that officer corps, the nobility, the aristocracy, have left the country. They have fled with the revolution going on. Now we have a whole bunch of new troops that are super enthusiastic, but they lacked the training. So if you're thinking back to the American Revolutionary War, the problem that we had over and over again was our troops would go out onto the battlefield with a lot of enthusiasm and then run away. So same thing in France. The troops would break ranks and they would flee. It's what you're going to have when you have soldiers that aren't very well trained. Now, France is going to eventually expand because there is going to be this guy who's going to rise through the ranks, Napoleon, and take a lot of territory and become that dictator that Burke spoke about. But France at this point has to basically worry about itself and now push on out through the Austrian Netherlands, or kind of go for more of a Napoleon tactic and come on through the Italian Alps and then go on into the Austrian Empire. So that we're going to be seeing that. So we have different political parties in France. The Jacobins are going to be a very large party. They held their meetings in the library of the former Jacobin monastery in Paris, and so that's how they got the name the Jacobins. And they're mainly filled with members of the middle class. However, over time, they become more and more radical as the revolution goes on, and they create vast networks of clubs throughout France. And with this, we start to see another group emerge, the sans-culottes, those guys without the knee breeches. See, if you see here, we have a guy, he's wearing his breeches and his tights. And we got another guy wearing pants. Man, pants are the way to go now. We are not wearing the culottes anymore. So they're mainly members of the Parisian working class, shopkeepers, tradesmen, artisans, and they are the radicals of the movement. They instigated the violence of the revolution and what we're going to be seeing moving into the Reign of Terror, because they are highly patriotic and they don't want anybody to be against the revolution. So in September of 1792, we have rumors spreading that prisoners are going to break out of the jails and that they're going to attack the troops from the rear that are now moving out to attack the enemies like the Prussians. Mobs now run out with this misinformation, with this fake news, and they start to kill the people in the prisons. Now, remember, we do have a whole bunch of priests that are in the prisons because they refuse to take the oath, and they're massacred. I mean, this is brutal. This is, people coming at you with an axe. This is a horror movie. And this caused more and more people abroad to move away from supporting the revolution and wondering, what is up with you, France, and why are you not handling this violence that you're seeing? So the National Assembly now becomes a National Convention. Name change. It's September 1792, and the first act that comes on in here is to formally abolish the monarchy. The king tried to flee. I mean, abolish it. And now they also move into calling this year one of a new French calendar. We'll be getting to that in a little bit, but France is, going to throw the old calendar out the window and start a new one. And so now delegates are pushing to put the king on trial, and they will put the king on trial as a traitor. Now, there's some people that were saying that he was corresponding with the Austrians and sending information, military information, to have France lose the war, different things like that. But really, I mean, when he fled, kind of the jig is up. And they put him on trial and see him as kind of what is wrong. And also they see him as kind of that last bastion of the old regime. But what is wrong with France in this last light of the old regime that has to be taken out? Not everybody wants the king to be executed as a traitor. Some just simply want him to no longer be king. And yeah, maybe if he wants to go to Austria, go to Austria. Who cares? You just don't need to be our king. While others are stating that they want him to be executed, that they have to end the monarchy. And in the end, when the votes are cast, they vote for Louis to be executed. Now, Louis tries to go out like Charles I of England when he showed up for his execution. He tried to give a speech to the crowd, just like Charles I had done, but they're not having it. Drums start to beat, crowds are jeering, and this is a very different group than what England had when they executed their own king. Anyway, Louis is executed, and now the question is what happens to Marie Antoinette and to her children? What's going to happen to them now as the cannons blare to announce the death of a king? Well, time passes, and then they decide to put her on trial also as a traitor. When she showed up for her trial, people noticed that her hair had turned gray and that she was a very different woman than the one that she used to be back at Versailles. Her biggest concern and her biggest fear was what would happen to her children. She saw the writing on the wall. She knew what happened to her husband. And her biggest thing was her children. She remained quiet through most of her trial, except for at one point when people started to go a little too far in their accusations, even talking about incest with her son. And at that point, she stood up and she appealed to the mothers of France and spoke out against all of what was happening and basically shut everybody up in the room. Because they realized, okay, we're going a little bit too far. Why don't we just cast our vote? And they did find Marie guilty, and they sent her to the guillotine in October 1793. Now, with her, she was not given a royal carriage to bring her there. She was just led in an open cart like other people would be led to for the guillotine. And this drawing that you're seeing here on the right was made by an artist as she was sitting in the cart on the way to her execution. Now, what does happen to her children? Well, they are put into the care of a jailer. Her son, little Louis, unfortunately, is going to be neglected, beaten until he does die of sheer neglect. However, her daughters will survive the revolution. So her fears do, though, come to pass with her son. Going on with England, looking about what's going on over in France, Great Britain has Prime Minister William Pitt. And so he approved the acts suspending habeas corpus to protect British citizens. He does, and the British government. He does not want to have a revolution start over in Great Britain. And basically, certain ideas were considered treasonable. Other countries also made sure that this revolutionary spirit of France would not continue on over to their area. So we have this Committee of Public Safety that is going to be developed. And now the Committee of Public Safety is supposed to oversee and help with the work of the government during the time of crisis. We also have the Committee of General Security, which was created to pursue counter-revolutionaries. But what this Committee of Public Safety is going to do is it is going to turn into this Reign of Terror Committee. They are going to seek out anybody that they possibly think is an anti-revolutionary, which could be anybody. The head of it is going to be a man by the name of Maximilien Robepierre. He is a person that used to be extremely against the death penalty, and then he is going to be one that is going to send a whole bunch of people to the guillotine when he is asked what has changed, and he basically just replied, times have changed. We're in a different time. That's it. So he went after anybody he would consider to be an anti-revolutionary and have them executed. During his reign with the Committee of Public Safety, we are going to have around 300,000 people arrested. And in Paris, 16,000 to 50,000 people executed. Now, the free press is operating, and one of the main writers is JeanPaul Marat. He wrote newspaper articles with lists of anti-revolutionaries and published them. And basically, then those people would be rounded up and killed by the guillotine that day. Now, a lady from the countryside, Charlotte Corday, saw him as the man that was, in a way, ruining the revolution, but also a man who was just kind of causing a whole bunch of innocent people to die, because he was. And so she showed up under the guise that she was going to give him a list of anti revolutionaries. And now Marat suffered from a skin condition, so he spent most of his time in a medicinal bath all day long. And as you can see from the painting with a plank over it, so nobody would see anything. And so Charlotte Corday walks into the room as he is again lying in his medicinal bath, and she pulls out a little knife, a stiletto knife, and kills him. The one thing with this, though, is that she doesn't end the Reign of Terror. She doesn't end the guillotine. What she does is she turns JeanPaul Marat into a martyr, and she herself then is going to be led to that guillotine and killed the next day. So the Reign of Terror is this time period where real and imagined enemies of the the revolution are arrested and executed. It's peasants, nobles, clergymen, business people, and ex-revolutionary leaders. It's mainly the middle class that is going to be taking the brunt of this, not the old nobility. It's the working class and the middle class. They are just going to be taking out their own throughout this time period. So we're going to have a lot of changes in legislation during this terror. We're going to have the law of suspects. People had to be in support of the revolution. If they showed any dissent, then they could be executed, and they would be. We have that law of general maximum limiting the price of grain and other essential items. Bakers basically had to bake bread at a loss by law. We then have a revolt coming up in the Vendée area of France. This is a more rural area, and the peasants are not seeing any changes from the revolution that they like. They still have high taxes. Now they're being conscripted into the military, which is taking the young men away from the fields, and they still have a lot of other burdens, and they messed with the church. I mean, this is Sunday fun time. So resentment about the government doing all of these things have now brought them to revolt against the revolution. And so the military has to be brought in, and they tie people, these people that are trying to stop the revolution, anti-revolutionaries, they tie these people to boats or to planks, and they drown them in the river. That is their punishment for what is going on. However, these rebellions do spread to other areas of France as well. Now we have the DeChristianization in France that is going to be happening. The Catholic Church was still linked to the monarchy and to the old regime and to counter-revolutionaries, and most sans-culottes called for abolishing the church in France altogether. They wanted a rational and secular society, so they create a 10-day week calendar, so over time nobody would know when Sunday was or when Christian holidays were. They abolish the Christian church, and they start this new calendar with that year one, day one of September 22nd, 1792, as I previously mentioned. So all public shows of religion are banned. They rename state or streets. Like, you can't have a street called Saint Denis. That's a saint. The Paris Commune pushed for the destruction of religious statues. For a time period, Notre Dame was just a storehouse, and then it becomes the Temple of Reason. But we'll get there. And clergy were encouraged to give up their vocation altogether, or of course be labeled as a anti-revolutionary. Robespierre felt that this doesn't really work, and so that the people needed some sort of religion, so he created the cult of the supreme being and said we can worship reason, and Marat could be like a Jesus type figure for them. And so he held the festival of the supreme being in Paris. He made a huge large paper mache mountain that held a choir that were singing songs that were written for this. And Robespierre climbed to the top of this paper mache tower and gave a speech while wearing a toga about reason. For some people, they thought that Robespierre had lost his mind at this point, while other people were enthralled with this. However, there is still going to be, again, a backlash in the rural areas where they're like, you just took away our religion? What? I mean, we all kind of know you don't go on Facebook and talk religion unless you really want to deal with that. And so when Robespierre goes and cancels out religion and then starts this new festival, we've got problems. We've just got problems. There's your paper mache mountain, people. Paper mache mountain. I mean, that is the best art project you could probably do, unless it rains. Then it's a bad day. Anyway. So the tear continues. The Jacobins and the followers of Danton began to clash. Robespierre went after Danton and had him executed. Now, who is Danton? Danton is the other big figure of the National Assembly, or now the National the National Assembly. It's fine. Danton is a guy that is seen as being the guy that the working class can follow inside the legislature. And Robespierre goes and has him executed. They then create another law where basically the trial result is liberty or death. And now you can be tried without any evidence against you, which is going to lead to even more executions. And Robespierre continues to push and push and push against enemies of the state. He sees them all over the place. I mean, paranoia is going up. And then he starts to target the National Assembly itself. He shows up one day and says, I have a list of anti-revolutionaries that are here in this legislative house. And we are going to tomorrow take this list, arrest these people, and bring them to the guillotine. Well, there's his downfall, because he doesn't do it immediately. And I know if I would be sitting in that legislature, I would be going, I'm not going to take it out to the guillotine tomorrow. You can. And so what does the National Assembly do? They go and arrest Robespierre. They put him and lock him in his office for a period of time. And they hear gunshots go off. Him and another one of his colleagues have shot themselves, and a third member that was in the room that was also arrested jumped out a window. However, with Robespierre, when he tried to shoot himself, he didn't really aim right, and all he did was shoot off his jaw. He was very much alive and in insane pain, and his jaw was kind of just hanging there. They then laid him on his desk and eventually moved him to the same prison where they held Marie Antoinette before her execution. And he laid in absolute misery. He couldn't talk anymore. The great orator of the revolution now is, speechless. They bring him out to the guillotine the next day. And they do something a little bit, not nice. They guillotine him facing up. Of course, they can't stop him from closing his eyes, but the big thing is they said that they wanted him to kind of see that blade coming down at him. Now, with Robespierre's death, the reign of terror ends, because the major people that were pushing for all of this violence, Marat and Robespierre, are finally gone. So we do have now a change in France and a new government that wants positive change for them. Now, other things that happened during the French Revolution: the metric system of weights and measures was created. Slavery was abolished in France in 1791 and in the colonies in 1794. And the National Convention, legalized divorce and enacted shared inheritance laws, even for illegitimate children, to try to take out these inequalities that had been seen for so long. Now, the Thermidorian reaction is going to happen. The power of the Committee for Public Safety is going to be taken away. The Jacobin clubs are going to be closed. The churches are going to be reopened. And a new constitution of August 1795 is going to be written, at which point they are going to go for conservative republicanism here. It's also going to be known as the Constitution of the Year 3, where they rejected both constitutional monarchy and democracy as a form of government in France. Instead, they form a two-house legislative branch and an executive branch. It's just that their executive branch is going to kind of be a group of men meeting to make all the decisions instead of one person. And that's going to be known as the Directory. The sans-culottes also kind of come to an end. Peace treaties are signed with Spain and with Prussia. We have one guy, though, that during this time period tries to take out the Directory, the executive branch, Gracchus Babeuf, with his conspiracy of equals. He wanted to distribute property evenly among all citizens, but the plots fail. I mean, you can't necessarily distribute property evenly among every single citizen and have enough for production and things like that. But either way, he failed in his overthrow and was executed. Now, the Directory itself is going to be weak because of the sheer suppression of the sans-culottes, who were very politically motivated and still very pro-France and pro-war and pro all of these other things. The two-thirds law that they created favored people that are already in office for passing things. We have a Catholic royalist revival, and we just have the wars that they have to deal with, and we still have bread costing too much. They did not actually solve the problem that they had in 1789, 1788, or 1787. The price of bread is still too high. And so with this, a man by the name of Napoleon is going to come in and take out the Directory. And that will be part 3 of the series. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.